Have you ever wondered what keeps a nation alive when the world around it is crumbling? Is it the roar of engines, the clash of steel, the thunder of factories? Or is it something quieter, something hidden in the hearts of ordinary people? That question lingered in the dim, smoke-filled halls of Dawson Manufacturing on a freezing night in 1942. The factory never slept. Flames glowed like restless beasts inside the furnaces. Conveyor belts groaned, hammers sang, and sparks drifted through the air like embers from a dying star. Eleanor Brooks, just 17, stood among all this chaos holding a broom with blistered hands. Her shift had begun at sunset, and the war had turned every sunset into a beginning rather than an end. America needed more steel, more planes, more ships, and it needed them fast. Eleanor used to write stories in the attic of her childhood home, stories about brave characters saving the world with hope and kindness. Now she swept metal dust off the floor to keep the real world functioning. But as her broom scraped across the concrete, she sensed something shifting, like the factory, the war, and her life itself were holding secrets waiting to erupt. She had no idea how right she was. Every worker noticed him eventually. He moved like a ghost through the factory, silent, sharp-eyed, always observing. He didn't shout like the supervisors. He didn't joke like the mechanics. He rarely spoke at all. His name was Samuel Reed, rumored to be some sort of government engineer sent by Washington to evaluate wartime productivity. Some said he was brilliant. Some said he was dangerous. Others whispered he had the power to shut the whole plant down if he wanted to. Eleanor just noticed his eyes, tired, searching, as though they carried years of memories too heavy to voice. One late shift, she struggled to maneuver a cart overloaded with metal sheets. It screeched against the floor, refusing to budge. Suddenly, a gloved hand rested on the handle beside hers. "Let me help," Samuel said in a calm, low voice. Eleanor blinked. No supervisor ever helped a worker. It felt strange, kind. Together, they pushed the heavy load across the hall. "These machines look powerful," Samuel said, "but without people like you, they're nothing more than hollow metal." Eleanor felt warmth in her chest, a rare moment in a cold world. "Thank you," she whispered. Samuel nodded, and for the first time she saw a faint smile. A week later, Eleanor snuck into the break room to warm her hands near the small radiator. The war had stolen coal rations, and the building felt like a refrigerator most nights. She heard voices in the adjoining office, Samuel's firm tone and the supervisor's harsh replies. "You can't keep pushing the machines like this," Samuel warned. "A failure is coming. The line will collapse." "We don't need your caution," the supervisor snapped. "We need output." "You're driving these people to exhaustion," Samuel insisted. "Morale is falling. If it drops any lower, the entire plant will shut itself down." "They're replaceable," the supervisor growled. Eleanor's breath hitched. Replaceable. Like parts, not humans. "No," Samuel said quietly. "They're not." Eleanor pressed her hands to her chest. No one ever defended workers like that. She backed away before she could be caught, but the words clung to her like smoke. Samuel wasn't just here to inspect the factory. He was fighting for something. The winter storm that night knocked out the power in her neighborhood. The Brooks home, small, worn, and dim, fell silent except for the wind rattling the shutters. Using a candle, Eleanor searched for blankets when she accidentally opened a drawer in her father's old desk. Her father had died at Pearl Harbor, and the family had left most of his belongings untouched out of grief. Something inside the drawer caught the candlelight, a sealed envelope, crisp and clean despite the dust around it. Her heart skipped. The envelope was addressed not to her mother, but to Samuel Reed. Her fingers trembled as she held it. Why would her father write to a stranger, a factory engineer he had never met? Or had they met? Was Samuel hiding something? She slipped the letter into her coat pocket. She needed answers. The next morning, she watched Samuel supervise the testing of a new pulley system. When the machine finally powered down, she approached him cautiously. "I found this," she said, offering the envelope. "It was in my father's desk." Samuel froze. His eyes widened. For the first time, he looked vulnerable. "How long have you had this?" he whispered. "I found it yesterday." He turned the envelope over in his hands like it was made of glass. I can't open this," he murmured. "But you have to," Eleanor insisted. "It's meant for you." Samuel slowly tucked the letter into his coat pocket. "Your father, Captain Brooks, meant more to me than I can explain." Eleanor's confusion deepened. How could her father be connected to a man working in a Detroit factory? Before she could ask, a loud alarm blared. The furnace in Section 3 was overheating. Samuel whipped around. "Later," he said. "I promise we'll speak later." But fate had other plans. Section 3 erupted into chaos. A conveyor line snapped, sending molten fragments scattering across the floor. Workers jumped back, supervisors panicked, machinery screeched in agony. Samuel dashed to the shut-off valve, twisting it as flames licked at his sleeves. Eleanor helped lead workers out of the danger zone. Her heart pounded, not from fear of the fire, but from the realization of how close they were to disaster. When the flames died, the blame war began. Supervisors accused workers of negligence. Workers accused supervisors of overloading the machines. Samuel accused the system itself. "This collapse wasn't caused by a mistake," he said. "It was caused by exhaustion, by pushing men and women past the limits of what's human." But his words only fueled tension. When the meeting ended, nothing had changed, except Eleanor. She was starting to see the cracks, not only in the machines, but in the people running them. A few nights later, Eleanor walked past the engineering room and saw light glowing under the door. Curiosity tugged at her. She pushed the door slightly open. Samuel stood over a drafting table covered in blueprints, new conveyor systems, reinforced support beams, safer furnace layouts. He scribbled notes furiously, muttering calculations. "These aren't repairs," Eleanor said from the doorway. "You're redesigning the entire plant." Samuel looked up, startled but not angry. "I'm trying," he said quietly, "to save it, and the people inside it." "Why risk your job for us?" she asked. He hesitated. "Because your father taught me that the true strength of a nation isn't found in its weapons, but in its workers." Eleanor felt a chill, not of fear, but destiny. Samuel gathered a small group of trusted workers late one night. Eleanor, Joe the welder, Marlene the mechanic, old Frank from Shift C. They formed a circle around the drafting table like conspirators. "We're going to rebuild parts of the plant," Samuel explained. "Quietly, efficiently, safely." Joe frowned. "Without permission?" "We'll get permission when the results speak for themselves," Samuel replied. Frank coughed. "You want us to do an engineer's job?" Samuel shook his head. "I want you to do a human job. Improve what you use every day. You know these machines better than anyone in Washington ever will." Something stirred in the room, a sense of unity. For the first time since the war started, Eleanor felt hope simmering through the factory walls. The secret project grew like a heartbeat, pulsing beneath the factory's surface. Workers reinforced beams that had been cracked for months. Marlene repaired the ventilation system so the smoke didn't sting their lungs. Joe redesigned a welding arm using spare parts and old bicycle gears. Frank taught younger workers tricks he had learned from 40 years of experience. Every improvement increased output. Every safer machine boosted morale. Every small success whispered the same truth. People, ordinary workers, were the real engine of America's wartime boom. Eleanor wrote everything down in a hidden notebook. The changes, the stories, the struggles. She was writing again, and she didn't even realize it. One evening, Samuel finally asked Eleanor to meet him in the quiet storage hall, away from prying eyes. He held the unopened letter. With trembling hands, he slid a finger under the seal. A single sheet slid out. His eyes scanned the words and filled with tears. "What does it say?" Eleanor whispered. Samuel handed her the letter, in her father's handwriting. "If fate takes me, keep the promise we made. Protect my daughter. Protect her hope. She is the future we were fighting for." Eleanor's throat tightened. "My father trusted you," Samuel nodded. "I met him during a mission near the Pacific. We survived a torpedo attack. We made a vow to protect each other's families." Eleanor's knees weakened. Her life, her safety, her future, all were tied to Samuel long before she ever met him. And the war was far from done revealing its secrets. The momentum in Dawson manufacturing was finally shifting. Workers whispered proudly about their secret improvements. Machines ran smoother, safer, stronger. And for the first time since the war began, laughter slipped between the clang of metal. But good news spreads fast, and trouble spreads faster. One cold morning, 3 government officials in crisp gray suits walked through the factory gates. Their badges glinted under the pale winter sun. The supervisors stiffened immediately. Whispers flowed like water. "Who are they? Did someone report us? Are we shutting down?" Eleanor watched from the second-floor catwalk as Samuel approached the officials. His face betrayed nothing, but she sensed his heartbeat racing. The lead inspector spoke sharply. "We received reports of unauthorized modifications to federal machinery, sedition, sabotage, disobedience." The supervisors were eager to shift blame. "That man," one of them shouted, pointing at Samuel, "he's been influencing the workers, undermining authority." Eleanor clenched her fists. Samuel raised his chin. "If improving safety and productivity is sabotage, then yes, I'm guilty." The room fell into shocked silence. The inspectors demanded a walkthrough. Everyone in the factory felt like they were marching toward judgment. Marlene wiped oil from her hands nervously. Joe hid the redesigned welding tools under a tarp. Frank muttered a prayer under his breath. The inspectors moved like hawks through the aisles. "What's this modification? Who authorized that gear replacement? Why is the airflow redirected?" Supervisor Doyle sneered behind them, arms crossed, waiting for Samuel to fall. Then they reached the modified assembly line, the one Samuel and the workers had built from scraps and sweat. The line ran faster, smoother, and safer than anything Washington had ever approved. One inspector stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "This output rate, this efficiency, this is impossible." Samuel gestured at the workers. "It's not impossible, it's human." Eleanor held her breath. The inspector tapped a clipboard. "These numbers, they surpass every federal guideline." The supervisor's jaw dropped. The lead inspector turned to Samuel. "You haven't sabotaged anything." A pause. "You've revolutionized it." The workers erupted in relieved smiles. Samuel's shoulders sagged, the burden lifting at last. The government approved every change. Their secret was now a blueprint for the nation. The transformation of Dawson manufacturing rippled through America like a quiet storm. Within weeks, factories from Ohio to California sent letters requesting consultations. Teams of engineers visited the plant. They took notes, asked questions, interviewed workers. For the first time, ordinary laborers were viewed not as replaceable bodies, but as innovators. Samuel became the reluctant face of a new industrial movement, one powered by empathy, not orders. But Eleanor noticed something else. Workers came to her with their concerns, their stories, their struggles. She became the voice between the floor and the office. She kept writing, documenting every change in her notebook. Late at night, Samuel would find her sitting near a machine, scribbling furiously. "You're capturing history," he told her once. She didn't know it yet, but she truly was. Just when it seemed things were finally improving, bad news struck like a hammer. A telegram arrived addressed to Samuel. His hands shook as he opened it. Eleanor watched his face drain of color. "What is it?" she whispered. He swallowed hard. It's him. The third man in the photograph, Lieutenant James Holloway. He's been declared missing in action." Eleanor's heart ached. This was the man tied to her father and Samuel through tragedy, friendship, and promises made under fire. Samuel retreated into silence. Days passed. His eyes remained distant, his voice barely above a whisper. One night, Eleanor found him sitting alone by the silent furnaces, staring into the ashes. "Every time I build something," he said, "war tears something else down." Eleanor gently placed her hand over his. "Maybe that's why you have to keep building." Her words hung in the air, soft yet powerful. Weeks later, the plant received its biggest order yet. Hundreds of crucial bomber components needed immediately. The war in Europe was reaching a boiling point. Planes, tanks, and supplies were needed faster than ever. But the factory was exhausted. Workers limped through shifts. Marlene's hands shook from fatigue. Joe could barely keep his eyes open. Samuel presented a solution to the supervisors. "We give workers an extra day of rest. One day. They'll return stronger and finish the job." The supervisors scoffed. "That's unacceptable. They can rest after the war." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Without rest, they'll collapse before the machines do." The supervisors refused, so Samuel did something reckless. He worked alone, 3 nights in a row, barely eating, barely sleeping, recalibrating machines, repairing gears, welding supports. Eleanor begged him to stop. "You're killing yourself," she cried. Samuel smiled weakly. "I'm keeping a promise. To your father, to this factory, to all of you." On the third night, his body finally gave out. He collapsed beside the assembly line. Eleanor screamed for help. Samuel woke in the infirmary, pale and trembling. Workers gathered outside the door, anxious, whispering his name like a prayer. Eleanor stepped onto a crate in the center of the factory floor. She wasn't a leader. She wasn't an engineer. She wasn't even legally an adult. But the factory fell silent as she spoke. "Samuel almost died trying to keep this place alive," she said, voice cracking. "He believes in us more than anyone. If he can give everything, then so can we." A murmur spread through the floor. "Not for the war," she continued. "For each other." Joe raised his fist. "I'm with her." Marlene nodded fiercely. "For Samuel." One by one, hands lifted. The factory roared back to life. They worked in perfect unison. They finished the massive order 2 days early, and when Samuel returned to the floor, still weak, the workers erupted in applause, their cheers crashing against the steel walls like thunder. He had saved them. But now, they had saved him. Spring brought rain, hope, and yet another telegram. Eleanor found Samuel reading it in stunned silence. "What now?" she asked anxiously. Samuel's lips trembled. "We found him." "Who?" "Holloway. He's alive." Eleanor gasped. According to the telegram, Lieutenant James Holloway had survived a plane crash and lived on a remote island with other soldiers for months until a rescue team found them. Samuel sank into a chair, tears slipping down his cheeks. "My last link to your father is alive," he whispered. For the first time in months, the weight on his shoulders lifted. Eleanor hugged him tightly. Sometimes war took, sometimes against all odds. It returned something. The announcement came over the radio one golden morning. Germany has surrendered. The war in Europe is over. A hush fell over the factory. Machines turned off. Sparks faded. Workers removed their helmets slowly, as if afraid the silence would break. Some cried, some prayed. Some simply stood still, unable to process what peace even sounded like. Eleanor looked around and felt something indescribable, the weight of a future suddenly made possible. But she also felt her father's absence more sharply than ever. Victory couldn't bring him back. Yet as Samuel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, she realized something. Her father's legacy wasn't lost. It was living inside her, and in the factory around her. Years passed, factories slowed, soldiers returned. The world rebuilt itself piece by piece. And Eleanor, now grown, confident, and carrying the fire of her past, published a book titled The Untold Secrets Behind America's Wartime Industrial Explosion. But the secret wasn't steel. It wasn't machinery. It wasn't engineering. The secret was people. People like Samuel, who led through compassion. People like Marlene, Joe, Frank. Ordinary heroes in grease-stained uniforms. People who rebuilt a factory, not with tools, but with unity. The book became a national inspiration. But Eleanor didn't care about praise. She cared about honoring every worker whose story deserved to be remembered. On the anniversary of her father's death, Eleanor visited Samuel at his quiet countryside home. Age had softened him. His hair had silvered, but his eyes still carried warmth. "I have something for you," Samuel said, handing her a weathered wooden box. Inside were dozens of letters, all written by her father. Letters Samuel had kept safe for years, letters filled with love, advice, dreams for Eleanor's future. Her hands shook as she read the final one. "If I cannot return, let my daughter grow in the strength of good people. Let her write. Let her lead. Let her become the story I never got to finish." Eleanor broke into tears. She realized something profound. The wartime miracle was never about factories. It was about hearts, brave, fragile, determined hearts, choosing hope when the world offered none. And now the legacy of her father, Samuel, and every worker was hers to carry forward. A legacy not built from steel, but from stories. Her stories.